Hello, everyone. Good evening. Myself, Davis Vavachan, International Affairs Editor of the Renaissance Journal. Welcome to Expert Talks. Today, we are joined by Professor Avram Noam Chomsky, an American linguist, philosopher, political activist, and above all, one of the most influential public intellectuals in the world. Professor Chomsky is considered the father of modern linguistics. He also gained a worldwide following as a political dissident for his analysis of the malignant influence of economic elites on US domestic politics, foreign policy, and intellectual culture. He is currently a laureate professor in the Department of Linguistics in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Arizona. Welcome, sir. So,
Very
sir,
pleased to be with you.
so the first question: following the outbreak of COVID 19 in 2020, we saw several superpowers in the world taking economic and political measures which can be termed protectionist. We also saw how major economies based on capitalist systems failed to address the economic challenges which followed the pandemic. What will be the long term impacts of the pandemic on the international eco political landscape?
Well, the pandemic, which of course is still raging, possibly worse to come, it's not over. It did lead to very effective scientific results, a very rapid development of effective vaccines, which was substantial achievement. But then that's basically where it stopped. The vaccines were monopolized by the rich and powerful countries. There was an international consortium, COVAX, which was it was designed to ensure that the vaccines would be available throughout the less developed world, but that never happened. The rich countries basically monopolized them. Europe was even worse than the United States in this respect. That meant that Africa, much of Asia, Latin America were deprived of vaccines. That's not only cruel and brutal policy, but it's also self-destructive because it means that there's an arena for the virus to mutate, new variants coming, which will, of course, strike back and have struck back at the rich countries themselves. This problem has not been overcome, unfortunately. What the long-term effect of that will be hard to see. India is in a special position. It's of course, a major vaccine producer, has an advanced pharmaceutical industry, but it's been nowhere able to make up the gap in providing for much of the world. This is, unfortunately, this is not a lead issue. It should be. It should be an issue of primary concern, but it's marginalized in the West. You don't see much discussion of it. It's an element of much broader policy decisions which place primacy on the welfare of the rich and powerful and treat the rest of the world as deserving. There are many more examples. the terrible crime of refugees is even worse. I mean, Europe, for example, has ravaged Africa for centuries, devastated Africa. Now people are fleeing Africa from drought, effects of global warming, wars, conflicts, and many of them European instigated, and they're being left to drown in the Mediterranean. Europe, in fact, has established military bases deep inside Africa, Niger, elsewhere, to try to prevent refugees from even reaching the Mediterranean. Same thing's happening in the United States at the border with regard to Central America by now. Refugees coming from everywhere. There are even refugees from India trying to cross the border, not far from where I live in the southern United States, and being driven into extremely hostile, brutal areas, then forced back violently. It's a major crime which is going to become much more severe as the effects of global warming intensify, and large parts of South Asia, Middle East, Africa will become literally unlivable, leading to a huge flight of refugees far beyond anything we've seen now. These are all issues that are going to tear the world apart. Nobody knows how they'll be resolved.
So, as you pointed out, one of the most important issues that the world is facing now, and the major one is of refugees. From that point, let me take you to the other question, which is very pertinent. As the United States armed forces completed their withdrawal from Afghanistan on 30th August 2021, many political analysts pointed out the possibility of US allies in Europe and Indo-Pacific losing confidence in the largest military superpower in the world. How do you think the actions of the United
The
States in
withdrawal from
Afghanistan would impact its
Afghanistan
status as a global
was
policy?
withdrawal from an invasion that made no sense for the United States in the first place. After 9/11, the Bush administration decided to carry out a major military action in Afghanistan for no strategic purpose. It was mainly, actually, probably the best explanation I heard about this was given by one of the leaders, the most respected leader of the anti-Taliban Afghan resistance, Abdul Haq, highly respected figure, later killed. He was interviewed shortly after the invasion. He was asked, why did the United States invade? He said, the United States invaded because it wanted to show its muscle and intimidate everyone. It undermined the efforts of the resistance to overthrow the Taliban from within. The United States had no strategic purpose. That was made very clear, in fact, after the bombing began. The Taliban agreed to surrender, which would have meant handing over anyone the United States wanted. The United States refused, said, we do not negotiate surrenders. We want to carry out the war. Well, Afghanistan is devastated by now. Literally millions, maybe tens of millions of people are facing starvation and destruction. So the U.S. pulled out because it had no more need to be there. It was not a serious part of the U.S. international strategic effort. And the U.S., in fact, increased its efforts in the Indo-Pacific region. This became very dramatic just a few days ago. the NATO summit. NATO had a major summit meeting last week. For the first time ever, NATO invited its US allies in the Indo-Pacific region. That had never happened before. And in fact, the official strategic concept that was presented at the summit, the result of the summit, declared the Indo-Pacific region to be a region of central importance for NATO. So they rearranged the world geography so that the Indo-Pacific region is part of the North Atlantic. That officially made NATO a global military alliance attempting to incorporate the Indo-Pacific region. And this is not just words. At the same time, in fact, right now, as we're speaking, there are huge naval operations going on in the Pacific, the so-called RIMPAC operations, Rim of the Pacific. Dozens of countries, huge naval contingents, directed, of course, by the US Navy, very clearly aimed at China. It's this is part, at the same time, the US is establishing what it calls officially, this is under Biden, a rim of so-called sentinel states, allied states whose task is to encircle China. That's South Korea, Japan, Australia, India is supposed to be part, but it's a very reluctant partner. It's refusing to participate. And these are being supplied with advanced weapons, precision-guided advanced weapons aimed at China, all as part of the effort to encircle China, while right in the background, the huge naval exercises, RIMPAC, are taking place as we speak. Actually, years ago, China used to be part of RIMPAC, but it was expelled about 5 years ago, making it more clear that all of these efforts are an attempt to encircle China. If you look at it from a broader perspective, the whole Eurasian region is now being developed by China and integrated into China. The Belt and Road Initiative, which is probably the largest development program in history. And the US wants to encircle it at the east and at the west. At the east, it's expanding NATO, main factor that led to the Ukraine war. That's in the west. In the east, it's encircling China and carrying out military exercises to fortify this. So there's a major geostrategic conflict taking place with Eurasia in the center. We may recall that the founder of modern geopolitics, Harold Mackinder, over a century ago, premised his theories on the idea that control of Central Asia was the key to world control. And Britain was an island off the coast of Europe, and the United States and the Western Hemisphere are basically islands off the coast of Eurasia. And that's the global struggle that we're now seeing developing. India and most of the global South in general is trying not to take part in this. It's see it mainly as a European war they don't want to have any part of. Meanwhile, Russia, as one element of the Ukrainian war, is that Russia is being driven closer to China. Russia is not an advanced industrial society, but it does have enormous resources, incomparable mineral, oil, other resources, has high scientific capacity and is, though it's not a generally developed society, has high military competence. And China's quite happy to have all of that integrated into its growing Eurasian project as a major contributor. The countries of the global south are basically taking a standoff position on this. We don't want to be part of your wars. It was quite striking at the G20 conference last week. Finance ministers of the major countries took place in Indonesia. And if you read the New York Times, they said that Russia was being treated as a pariah state. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it, except that virtually all the world was welcoming Russia. Indonesia, the host of the meeting, China, India, Brazil, none of these were taking part in the US-European effort to isolate.
We were talking about a global struggle which is happening in the world today. Few months before the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we saw how European states and Western allies pledged their full support to Ukraine. But then, when actual military operation began, all the support and help was restricted to either sanctions or arms and ammunitions. What do you think the US and its Western allies are trying to gain here from this crisis?
Well, the US position is clear and explicit. It's not hidden. It was announced very clearly at a NATO conference called by the United States last month at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany, US Air Base in Germany, Ramstein. There, the United States made it clear and explicit that the goal of the war was to harm Russia, to weaken Russia severely to the point where Russia could not undertake any military actions again. That means a major war. Meanwhile, Ukraine is torn to shreds by ongoing war. Tens of millions of people around the world are facing starvation because of the closing. There was a major food shortage already, but closing the Black Sea region, which is a major food fertilizer exporter, has greatly exacerbated this. The efforts to reverse control global warming ended. In fact, they're going into reverse. Undertaken in order to weaken Russia and turn it into a basically less developed society. This was extended by the NATO summit last week, which simply restated all of these goals and reaffirmed the U.S. intention of integrating Ukraine into NATO. It's been known for 30 years that no Russian leader, Yeltsin, Gorbachev, Putin, any, will tolerate Ukraine right in the center of the geostrategic heartland, will tolerate that being incorporated into a hostile military alliance. And we're now seeing that played out. But if you ask what the US and Europe are intending, it's explicit. Up until recently, Europe was not entirely going along with this. But one crucial consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine was to drive Europe into the pocket of the United States. It's now simply following obediently US demands. So what we're seeing develop is a US-European alliance, which is seeking to extend over the Indo-Pacific, around the world. And on the other hand, Russia and China being pressed more closely together with the global South, trying to stay out of the way and gain what they can from this, but keeping options open to both sides.
So, sir, finally, your message to young people around the world who would be watching this interview in future through various platforms.
There is one overriding concern that has to be kept in mind when we discuss all of these issues. The great powers, United States, Europe, Russia, China, Japan, India, they will either find a way of cooperating with one another to deal with the urgent crisis of the day, or else we are all finished, period. We may be entering the final stage of human history because of the immense effects of heating of the climate. I don't have to describe that to you in India, where people can't live at that. It's going to get worse. Either we will deal with these problems together, including nuclear war, or else we all go down to disaster. That's the crucial message that has to be kept in mind, whatever else we're discussing.
Thank you, sir. It was an honor talking to you. As a student myself, I really wanted to meet you in person. So thank you so much for joining us today. And your words are going to be so helpful for the young minds and the coming generations in the sphere of international relations, politics, society, and linguistics. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be with you.